Alright, in this video I'm going to focus on the 2-4 servo assembly and the 1, 2, and 3-4 accumulator. So we're using Sonnax pinless accumulators for both the 1, 2, and the 3-4, as well as a Sonnax Super Hold servo assembly for both the second gear and the fourth gear. So here's our second gear servo. Our 2 check balls, you're only going to use one of them. Those check balls will block off the pinhole location. So it's going to be here in the accumulator cover. We need to block that off so that we don't have a massive leak in the 1-2 accumulator circuit. And then we have our fourth gear apply servo. I'm sorry, our fourth gear accumulator. I mean, I guess we do have our fourth gear apply servo as well, but that's not what I was pointing at. And that's not what I was meant to say. So the Sonnax second gear Super Hold servo comes with a servo pin, and this pin has 2 little seals, and they go on the pin like so. Okay, we're going to leave them off for right now, and we're also going to take off the seals here, the O-rings, off of the outer diameters of both the second gear servo housing and the piston itself. We're also going to take the seals off the cover for the fourth gear servo, and we want to do that because we want to be able to measure clearance for the band when we go to put the servo back in, because there's a possibility that we may have to grind down the servo pin, and if we have to do that, I would rather just have it so it's nice and easy to take this thing out versus have all the O-rings on there and the 2 pin seals. I mean, you risk damaging or breaking one or more of them, and then you gotta go somehow find replacements. I don't know if Sonnax sells these independently of the servo kits or not, to be honest. Fortunately, knock on wood, or that'll be a proxy for wood, I've never had to actually go and replace one of these O-rings or seals. So there's 2 inner seals as well, and they could stay on because these 2 inner seals will seal against the servo body here. So if you watched the, I guess what I'll call the overview video, where I talked about, the different servos, particularly the second gear servo, which is this one, and how they affect shift firmness, then, I mean, I guess this will be repeat, but if you hadn't, then what you'll want to know or take away is that the more apply surface area you have on a given servo assembly for second gear in these transmissions, 700R4, 4L60E, the firmer the shift will be from first to second. So your 554 servos, which are your lightest duty servo that went into like the small V6s and I think whatever 4 cylinders were in production that took a 700R4. They have the least amount of apply area. And then you have your 553, which is for pretty much all your V8 equipped vehicles except for the high performance stuff. So vets and F-bodies and high-end certain trucks and SUVs when it came to the 4L60E, and they all got the Corvette servo. So the Corvette servo has a little bit more apply surface area, so that the 1-2 upshift will be firmer by a little bit. And it'll be noticeable. Again, all other things equal, that means you just keep everything stock. You don't change the spacer plate hole sizes or anything like that. No shift kit. Just installing different servos will firm up your shift if you install progressively wider second gear servos. All right. So this goes together just like any other servo assembly. Okay. Like that, and then this, I'll put this in on the press, but that's where it has to go. And then you're going to have your return spring, your retaining washer, and then your little snap ring. Alright, so now we gotta go put the snap ring in, and I just do that on the press. So I'll be right back. Alright, we have it put back together. Now what we're gonna do is take our housing, and then you just wanna lube up the surface here. And then lube up your O-rings. And then just put it on. Pretty simple. Pretty simple. So you're going to take this washer and stick it here. And then you're just going to pair everything back up. Alright, so now the servo is assembled and it's ready for checking. I'll go over the procedure in detail when we get there, but what you'll need if you're going to do the procedure that Sonnax has you do per their instructions, you're going to need a dial indicator and some sort of base that will allow you to clamp the indicator to either the case or something else that's bolted to the case or around the case. I mean, it depends on if you're doing this on the bench or whether you're doing it with the transmission in the vehicle, but basically you're going to put the plunger here. You're going to make sure you have your primary return spring installed, and then you're going to measure the travel, okay? And there'll be some instructions that will give you guidance on, based on the extent of the travel, how you should interpret that. And what you ultimately do not want to do is have insufficient travel such that the band is bound up. In other words, it's dragging on the drum because the pin is partially applying it, and this pin's longer than your factory pins. So Sonnax does advise in the instructions that you have to grind off, or expect to grind off, about 100,000ths of an inch off of the end of the pin. So just be ready to do that. But other than that, it's more or less ready for its preliminary installation and travel check. Now, if you're doing this on the bench like I'm doing it, and the trans is all apart, you're gonna have the drums installed, you have the band installed, so you can just monitor the band clearance and check it to make sure that the travel is appropriate. And then when you once you have your clearance established, if you will, like it's good to go, then you can reinstall your seals, put it in for the final time, and then do your air checks. All right, let's go ahead and deal with the 1-2 accumulator housing. So Sonnax gives you the two different size check balls. This one here is going to be for 700 R4s and early 4L60Es that had a large pin, or large diameter pin in the 1-2. Most of your 4L60Es have a small diameter pin. And my aim was off. Alright. Alright, so I'm just going to use a drift. Same drift I used to install the check balls into the Ford accumulator piston pin bore. And you're just going to smack it on in. Okay, it's going to make it all the way to the bottom. Alright, that's all there is to it. All right, next go ahead and install your seals. So you'll notice here, let me zoom in a little bit. And get them in the frame would help, right? If you had them in the frame and can kind of know what the hell I'm talking about. So these seals, one's Teflon, one is rubber. They are of different thicknesses, you know, in terms of this way. Okay, this one's going to be about twice as wide as this one. All right, so this is wider, this is narrower. So when you look at the grooves in your piston, you're going to notice that this groove is deeper than this groove. So your wider O-ring seal, which is going to be your rubber one, is going to go on the top. That's the top groove. See, this thing will focus. All right. And then your Teflon sealing ring is going to go in the bottom groove. Now these Teflon sealing rings, you have to be careful when you install them. You don't want to overstretch them. So I just use a 45-degree angle pick. And I just, you know, carefully work it and stretch it just enough so that it can get by these legs. That's all you want to do. You don't want to overstretch, because you're going to use the bore of the housing to ultimately size it for the final time. Just carefully work it in. And there it goes. Okay, I use a relatively blunt tip pick, so you can grind on your tip a little bit if you have a 45-degree angle pick, but it's, you know, real sharp. So that'll help prevent you from cutting an O-ring. All right. Lube the bore. I'll zoom out a little bit. And lube up your piston. And then just go ahead and drop it on in. Okay, push on it, press on it, make sure it moves freely. If it's too free, that means you may have cut one of the seals, but this feels, you know, just like all the other ones I've done. So this one too, accumulator housing's done. So 3/4 piston. Now, you don't necessarily need one of these in the 3/4 if you plan on blocking off that circuit entirely. If you do, then, you know, you can run just a regular piston in there, you know, just to have something in there, but it's not necessary to, you know, put the pinless in there. Most of the time, you don't need to block it off entirely. A lot of times what I'll do, and you may have seen me do this, I'm not sure, can't recollect off the top of my head, but a lot of times what I will do is take the old 3/4, you know, factory accumulator piston that came in, you know, with the transmission, and grind off the, you know, the little bumps that are on the top of it. And then what I'll do is I'll install a brand new piston. I'll put the old piston underneath the new piston, you know, interlock the sets of legs, and then I'll put the new piston in like this with the new, you know, O-ring, and that's sufficient enough to more or less fully block off fourth gear accumulation, so that, you know, most of it goes to the apply servo. Yeah, it's a lot cheaper than installing the fourth accumulator piston. Because we're kind of going to the 9s with this build, it made sense to buy the kit. But if you're on more of a budget, that's one way to firm up the fourth gear shift. All right, so servo's done for now. We'll bring you back when we're ready to do the travel check / band clearance check, and then we'll install it for the final time and do the air check. It would help if it was in view. All right. All right, now we're ready to install the band and test fit the servo. So I had the band soaking in fresh Dex 3, so we'll go ahead and place it in. To seat it, get it in position, just kind of smack on the input shaft, up and to the right, and that'll allow the band to seat. And then just come in with your band anchor. And install that as well. So we have, without any servo in here, a decent amount of clearance. So I imagine if this pin, which these pins are longer than your standard factory pins, we're gonna be either bound, but we won't have to take a whole lot off the end of that pin, or we're gonna be perfect. In other words, take nothing off, just leave it as is, and the band clearance will be ideal. Most likely it's going to be the former. Most likely we'll have to do a little bit of grinding on the end of the pin. I've installed many of these, and a good majority of them had to have a little bit taken off. So anyway, here's the servo assembly. No seals, no O-rings. Let me put some assembly lube and hold this mainspring in place so that it doesn't, want to fall out on me. Okay, what we're going to do is I'm just going to install the snap ring if I can. If I cannot, then, well, we have our answer. I mean, we need to grind on that pin. Alright, let me reposition the camera so that I can get in between here and the tripod so that I can get this servo installed, or at least try to install it. Alright, so I'm forcing the servo in as far as I can go, as far as it will go, and let's see. And the band is dragging a little bit, and I'm not able to fully expose the snap ring in the groove. I got maybe half of it exposed. Yep, got to grind on it. So I'm going to take off roughly 100,000ths of an inch. And then once that's done, I'll bring you back and we'll try it again. Okay, ground off a bit. To the extent you can, you want to make this tip, you want to preserve that kind of rounded appearance. You don't want it too flat. So once we get it to the point where it's fitting and the clearance is what it should be, I'll kind of smooth the tip over with like a wafer pad and round it out as much as I can. Okay, we'll try again. Probably still going to be a little short, because I tend to take off, very little at a time. I like to sneak up on it. It's just how I prefer to do it. Fully engaged. And yeah, we still need to take a good deal off here. Alright, took a little more off, so now we're going to see if we can test fit it and get the snapper installed so that we can determine what kind of clearance we have, and if necessary, take a little more off. Okay, it's installed, and that is damned close to what I would consider ideal band clearance, but it still is dragging a little bit. As we can see, when I'm trying to move the band excuse me, on the drum, I could barely move it. You want to have around 1/8 of an inch clearance here. So you want to be able to move this band roughly that, distance front to back. So I think I need to grind just a little bit more, maybe as little as 50 thousandths of an inch or so, and that should get me to where I need to be. So let me do that, and then we'll try one more time. Okay, this should be it. Okay, that's perfect. That band is moving, by eye anyway, and by feel, roughly 1/8 of an inch, and that's what you want. Alright, we're ready to install this thing for the final time. So make sure you lather up the bore with a ton of assembly lube. I mean, use more assembly lube than you think you need. Last thing that you want to have happen is for one of those sealing rings to get cut on the way in. And I mean, unless you have a whole bunch of extra ones, you're going to be in kind of a real bad spot. So use plenty of lube. You want that thing to go in nice and easy. Plenty of lube in the bore. Plenty of lube on the sealing rings themselves. Make sure that your little pin seals are, like I said, pre-wound and for the most part below the surface of the pin, so that they don't get caught on the way into their location in the bore. And then just carefully install it. Alright, going to need to use the hammer and the screwdriver to fully seat this. What I really need to do is get some sort of piston, servo piston hold down tool. These are going to be a little more challenging to get in unless you have such a tool. than a traditional servo assembly, so like a factory one. Okay, so as you can see, band clearance is perfect, and the band is moving about 1/8 of an inch. So let's go ahead and do air checks. So I'll take you around to show you where I'm putting this thing. But here's 4th gear. And I still have my Fugazi nozzle on the tip of my blowgun, so you're going to hear a lot of air. Alright, I'll real quick switch camera angles and we'll show you. I mean, if you watch my other videos, you've seen it too, but we'll show you in this one also. To check your band apply for your 2nd gear and your 4th gear servo, you're going to put air in this location right here for 2nd gear, and then this location here for 4th. This is actually the 4th gear exhaust, but an air check just the same. Okay, just make sure your band anchor pin is fully seated, and then we'll do 2nd gear. Hey, that's nice, good apply.